Welcome to part 2 of the show this week, and we have Ms. Colleen Wright from the Tampa Bay Times. She's going to tell us a story about how things are progressing with the Tampa Bay Rays Stadium in St. Pete. Looking forward to a new one coming soon. There's a couple of proposals in front of the St. Pete Council that still need to be reviewed and voted on. So she'll share a lot about the prospect and future of said stadium. So let's get started. Hey, Colleen.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing absolutely wonderful. I'm Mark, and I'd like to introduce you to Matt.
Hello.
Okay. Hi, Mark. Hi, Matt.
Well, we are indeed fortunate. Colleen Wright from the Tampa Bay Times has joined us here today, and I cannot tell you, she has done a great job following the process of trying to get a new stadium in St. Pete. And Colleen, I got to tell you, I absolutely adored when you were asking questions back in January of 2023 to Brian Auld of the Tampa Bay Rays. And I heard you say, basically, so is Tampa still an option? That wasn't, I'm paraphrasing here. Let me set it up just a little more. Because Mayor Welch had come out there and had a press conference about, hey, guess what? We're going to go ahead and accept this whole thing going on with the Rays and the Hines development. And it's fantastic. And I had the feeling that the Rays were like, huh? Wait a minute. Were we ready to say that? But Brian Auld came out and I thought gave a very good press conference and was quite candid to your question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question everybody wants to know, right? Because most people are, pro moving the Rays to Tampa. But St. Pete's the one with the money willing to strike a deal. And it's kind of, there's been a lot of comparisons to a marriage, and maybe those are cliche or overwrought, but there's like one party that seems very willing and the other one, not exactly ready to commit, and maybe a third party, but doesn't really want to commit. So it's an interesting story.
Well, that's true. I mean, I've been keeping up with everything with Tampa Bay Times in your articles. Folks, I highly recommend, if you haven't done it yet, check them out online. Some great ways to track what's been happening and who some of the players are. And the players are, at this point, 8 people in the St. Pete City Council. Now, you've got quite a cast of characters. It's funny, before you came on, Matt and I were just talking about Seinfeld, and you've got some characters there, but these aren't quite that, but they each have their own flavor. They each have their own interests, and they each have their own, I guess, education points. And see, who was the lady? She brought to the light of day some things I think a lot of people should have thought early on. Lisette, what is the name here?
Lisette Hanowitz.
Lisette Hanowitz. And she brought to light, I think a lot of people either just skimmed over and missed. But because when we're talking about this deal just between St. Pete and the Rays, it's not just one simple contract on a couple of pages written down. This is actually 2 complete different initiatives, one for like an economic development and one for a stadium. However, they're interdependent upon one another. There's pieces of each one of them that need the other to be completed. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate. Yeah, it's kind of right. Exactly. They're kind of dependent on each other. They are 2 separate agreements. They're funded a little differently, but they kind of, one doesn't really happen without the other.
I would like you to take a moment and walk us through the last year of basically what events have taken place and how that's moved this process along. That's not asking too much.
Oh gosh, no, but I am going to go a little bit beyond that to give people more context. I mean, this stadium saga, really started around 2008 with then Mayor Rick Baker. They were looking at maybe putting a stadium downtown, maybe where Al Lang Stadium is. That's where the Rowdies play. The Rays, of course, bought the Rowdies and own the Rowdies. But that didn't really come to fruition. There's concerns about traffic, just didn't really work. But they wanted something maybe on the water. Then Mayor Rick Kriseman comes along, tries to get something, with the Rays, allows the Rays to look in Tampa, which is against their agreement, but the city council agrees to an MOU, an agreement, lets them look in Tampa. Nothing, that is the Ybor site and the K4 site that they were looking at. That doesn't pan out. Rick Kriseman's termed out after 8 years. Those relations go sour. Then he tries to just have any kind of development with or without a stadium. He picks a developer like 34 days before leaving office. Then Mayor-elect Ken Welch, who's our mayor right now, doesn't really commit to the plan to hire that developer. It was a developer out of Miami called Midtown Development. Mayor Ken Welch doesn't super agree to continue with them. And about 6 months into his tenure, this is like summer of 2022, Mayor Welch scraps the process that Rick Kriseman had put in motion and starts a new one. Asking for a stadium, invites the Rays to participate. So we're now in summer of 2022. 4 firms send in proposals. That January of 2023 is when the press conference that you just referenced happens. Ken Welch picks the Rays and their development partner Hines, says that they were the best of 4 proposals. Really, only 2 were pretty viable. And one was actually a finalist for the effort under previous mayor, Rick Kriseman. The city has been in negotiations with the Rays and their development partner Hines since January of 2023. So we're now a year and 5 months or so into negotiations. And in September of 2023, they announce a deal, like a broad outlines of a deal, pretty much. And they come out with a term sheet that kind of lays down the basic structure, a $1.3 billion stadium, larger half of that, 700 million, is on the Rays. The other half is split between the county and the city, but also there's going to be this larger redevelopment. That's like the second separate but conjoined half of the deal. But there's a lot of, odds and ends that need to be figured out. Altogether, it's a $6.5 billion redevelopment, including the stadium. And the build out is over 30 years. I mean, the earliest we'll see this thing come to fruition, if it does happen, is 2055. So you can imagine that there's a lot of, legal documents. Just the stadium alone is about a dozen documents. That's not even counting all the redevelopment around it. Residences, an African American History Museum, an entertainment hall, retail, open space. It's huge. It's massive. It's like a little village. So at this point, that kind of brings us to today. They're kind of working out all the documents. The city still is not super ready to discuss the stadium part. The city council met about 3 weeks ago to talk about the redevelopment. That went a little rocky. That's when Lisette Hanowitz, she's a former federal prosecutor, kind of put on her prosecutor hat and pointed out all kind of like the legal loopholes and loose ends in this agreement, and they're working on them. And now they're kind of working on these documents, trying to figure it out. And you're looking at July as the earliest for a vote. And that's the timeline, I think, in a nutshell, as much as I can condense it.
Wow.
That's outstanding.
I've had some practice.
Honestly, you hit on all the major points that I can think of. So that kudos to you. The only one that I throw out there is the sister city concept that kind of mentioned things for a while. But
how can I forget?
Have you noticed a change in the mood from all parties once that was squashed? Once that idea was gone, did all the relations and the progress, I guess, start becoming more positive in notes?
I would say yes, but also I think with a new mayor coming in. And this is important context because, like I said, relations soured with Rick Kriseman, former mayor before Ken Welch, and the Rays donated $50,000 to Welch's campaign when he was running for mayor. So there's just, with that context, it seems like they were on better footing. But there's really been not a lot of outward drama that happened under the Kriseman administration. That's not really present. I can't say that that's really happening. If it's happening behind closed doors, they're being very quiet about it because Stu Sternberg has praised the mayor. The mayor says that things are okay. They meet all the time, almost on a daily basis, to get this deal done. So I feel like if things were acrimonious, we'd maybe hear a little. We'd either hear about it, or they're being very good at keeping it behind closed doors.
One thing that Matt and I have noticed over the years is that the Rays on the field in the office have learned to negotiate, make good decisions about what it's going to take for success. Sometimes that means trading away a player. Sometimes that's for cash. It's for this, that, or the other. But I feel like a lot of that's been going on here as well, that decisions have to be made, some concessions probably on both sides. And it seems like it's a lot happening all at once, Colleen. And I don't know with the time frame that we're looking at that we're going to get the buy-in that we want to make this thing happen. And it's going to need a stronger buy-in than what I'm seeing today. I mean, there's, as you mentioned earlier, some players who were players in this case, I mean, the council, who were probably supportive or at least lukewarm for the Rays have now kind of gotten, I won't say adversarial, but questionable about what they have to say about it. And then you have some people like you were talking about with Lissette. She just looks at it with a very sharp eye and starts saying, when I put these two Lego pieces together, they don't actually match. There's something that's missing. And I think those things need to be said. And I think the Rays, because of what I'm hoping that the same methodology that they do with their team and trading players and making decisions that way will be the same when it comes to trying to come up with something that's going to work for everyone with the St. Pete Council.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think at this point, I mean, so I think there was a little bit of a shift on Thursday. You need 5 votes. You mentioned that there's 8 council members. You need 5 votes to vote yes. So 4-4, a tie is no deal. So you need 5 votes. And your tiebreaker, there's a 4th one who's positioned herself as a tiebreaker, then became very optimistic and looked like a for sure yes vote. And last Thursday, she didn't like some of the scheduling with the meetings and felt like it was rushed. And she kind of threatened, that she won't be a fool. And, she doesn't want this to go the other way, but she won't be a fool either. So you do have that going on. And what I think is important here is that these legal documents will guide future city councils and future mayor, people we can't anticipate yet, circumstances we can't anticipate yet. So it's pretty important that these, kind of legal loose ends are tightened up, because it's the future. And there's a no termination clause. The city can't get out of the contract as it's written right now. So it's a big deal. And, they were looking at getting this done in March. Those were their words. I think we're very, very optimistic. And how this is going now, I mean, we're looking at July at the earliest. And I think I'm sure the Rays and Hines want to get this done before elections come, because I guarantee you this will be an election issue come August for the primary and then November. And it'll probably be done by then, but who knows?
What would your feeling be if it fell through? Let's say the vote goes against the Rays, and their ambitions of getting the stadium done this way. What are your feelings on in terms of the amount of time? Because we're talking about, get the Rays being out of the lease at the Trop. Now, I know in some cases they've actually extended them year by year or tried to, and it's worked out or hasn't. So there's always that possibility. But what are your feelings in terms of, will the door remain open, or do you feel like it would be okay, that's it, we voted on it, now we're going to move on? Because they do want to develop the area in the site.
Sure. So I should say also that even critics of the deal, I mean, look, there's some people, including some council members, who are just against the overall principle of giving public money to a private enterprise, especially, a multi-million, probably almost in the billion, in the $1 billion for the Rays. They're kind of just against that principle. It's a fact that they're backed by decades of research that shows public investment into sports stadiums isn't really a good economic investment. It doesn't really net the returns that are always promised. But we do them anyway, right? I mean, we have stadium deals that are publicly funded all the time. So even at this point, I mean, even critics of the deal, not even the ones who are against principle, but they just want to make the deal a little bit better. So you'll see, for example, the Sierra Club has kind of made a coalition that says Rays to stay, but fix the deal. And at this point, people who are critics of the deal just want to maybe sweeten it, tighten up those loose ends, make it a little bit better, because I think they're reading the tea leaves and they read that like this is going to happen. So let's just make it as strong as an agreement as possible for the city. And you were right. You know, everyone looks at the end of the use agreement at the end of 2027 as kind of like a bomb is going to go off or something, but they could extend it. I mean, they would have to get lawyers involved and lawyer that, and it would be a whole other thing. But like, it's an option. Of course, it's an option. Of course, they could extend it. If a hurricane comes, you know, and delays or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure they can do that. Is it being discussed right now? No, I can't say it is. Is it possible that will be, you know, could be the case? Yeah, I don't see why not. I don't know. You know, when I asked the Rays, what are they going to do in a worst case scenario? Their response to me is, we're dealing with the situation right in front of us. And maybe, you know, you could take that as, I don't know, well, however you want to take that, but that is their answer. We're just focused on doing the best deal and focusing on what's ahead. So the tone right now is kind of, we need to just tweak the deal in place right now to make it make sense. Because even Mayor Welch told me in an interview last week that he agrees that some of the points that Lissette Hanowitz and others, including Richie Floyd, who is against the idea of publicly funding sports stadiums, that those folks raised valid concerns, valid, you know, he used words like valid, legitimate, and important. And that some of the points that they hammered on are points that his own team, the city's own team, tried to negotiate and failed to get on paper. So he sees that as part of the process, that city council steps in and kind of harps on these points, and maybe that'll get the Rays Hines to say yes.
Well, let's talk about one of those points. One of those is for the economic development, and there's target, and then there's what might happen. So tell us a little bit about that, because I think that was one of the points that the councilperson was talking about. And I hate to use the word critical because it sounded more like analytical. Here's something we need to address. So can you tell us a little bit about that particular point?
Sure. Yes. So in the agreement, there are minimum requirements, like the least amount that the Rays and Hines have to do. And I don't have the specific numbers in front of me, but it kind of lays out, I think it's like 4,800. Don't quote me on this, but it's like 4,800 residences, you know, like a minimum amount of hotel keys, like 750 or something like that. And there's like lower bounds, like this is the minimum you can do. What kind of ticked off some of the members like Lissette Hanowitz is that they're showing renderings and the economic benefits, but they're based on the target. And the target is not legally enforceable in the contract. It doesn't say you will do this and this. There's only minimum requirements. But the lawyers have said, well, those are kind of like upper bounds. They're almost limiting, right? They're almost like, you know, you can't do beyond this, is how they're looking at it. But really, they're only legally required to do the minimum, you know, spelled out requirements in the document. There are target development, you know, the target requirements, or I'm sorry, the target development is in there, but it's not legally bound right now. And all these renderings that you're seeing, some of the economic benefits that they talk about, that they mentioned in that workshop, it's a little misleading because that's not what's minimally required. You might end up with way less than what you're seeing in these renderings. Now, of course, the city will say, well, it's in Hines and the Rays' best interest to do the target development, right? Because they want to make more money. So, you know, you kind of, it's like that like free market idea, I guess, right? That you want, you know, they're incentivized to do that, but really they're not legally bound to do any of that as the contract reads right now.
Another thing that was brought up, because we were talking about two different documents, two different workshops that are independent upon another. Again, we're talking about the economic development and the other, the stadium. Now, can you tell us about the part about responsibility? Because it seems like there's, trying to remember, help me out here, Colleen. We're talking about like the owner of the Rays, maybe by name in one of the deals, but on the other one, it was much more open who that could be. It was being responsible.
Responsible. Are you referencing that Lissette Hanowitz pointed out that Stu Sternberg could remain as a developer? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Can you give us that? Because I'm sorry, I missed it. Yes, but that's exactly.
So, right. So she was, well, for one of her, you know, big things that she pointed out is that the parties of the actual agreement that the city has with Rays Hines, they're not named. They're not they're not named. They're unnamed parties. They're not described at all. And how it's written right now is Stu Sternberg's name is on one of the documents, and even if he were to sell the team, the way it's written is he would remain as a developer, even if he was no longer with the Rays.
Gotcha.
So it's things like that that, again, maybe should be cleaned up. That's how the city's maybe looking at it.
I know as a reporter.
And
Go ahead. Sorry, please continue.
oh, I was gonna say, just another thought I had is that the way it's also written right now is that there are 12 ways, 12 transfers that the Rays and Hines could, a big part of this deal, and probably the most controversial part of this deal, is that the city is selling 65 acres of public land at a pretty significant discount. January 2023, this land was appraised for $279 million. The Rays and Hines are getting it for $105 million. And that's not even all up front. They pay when they're ready to acquire those parcels. And the minimum they have to pay after 12 years is $50 million. The city is also throwing down $142 million for infrastructure. So like roads, sewers, demolition of the trop, a lift station, so like a sewage station. And the Rays and Hines, there's 12 ways, circling back, there's 12 ways for the Rays and Hines to transfer those parcels or turn around and sell those parcels, improved land with infrastructure at a profit to whoever. And the city does not have any control over that. There's no vetting. There's no approval that the city or the city council needs to have. The Rays and Hines could turn around and sell to whoever. There's 12 ways for them to transfer those responsibilities to unknown, to whoever.
Colleen, I know you've worked more than just in the Tampa Bay area. You worked also, you grew up in Miami, and I think you've worked elsewhere in Florida as well as a reporter. Am I correct?
I did, yes. I worked at the Miami Herald. I got my start there, and I worked there as a full-time professional too.
So the reason I bring this up, Matt, you might be able to say more to it than I, is that
stadium deal.
Yeah, you
Marlon?
got it.
Jeffrey Loria.
Oh, I've got stories about that actually.
Share a little.
Sure. So I actually started my journalism career in high school. I was 17 years old. I got a high school internship at the Miami Herald, and that was 2010, around that time. And that is when a bunch of Miami-Dade commissioners were getting recalled over the botched Miami Marlins stadium deal. So that was my first I literally started in the newsroom and two things happened. Miami-Dade commissioners were being recalled out of office for that. And also LeBron James was taking his talents to South Beach. That's what was happening in the summer of 2010 when I was there, to kind of bring everyone back to that time. And I actually, funny enough, saw the first home run happen at Marlins Stadium because it was between high school teams. They were bringing in high school teams to kind of soft open the stadium, how it runs and whatever. So I saw a high school kid actually make a home run in that stadium. So, but I was 17. I was a baby. So I didn't fully understand things as I understand them now. But yes, and I will say that, the Marlins Stadium deal left a bad taste in a lot of people. I mean, I'm born and raised in Miami. My parents were born and raised in Miami. It left a bad taste in everyone's mouths. And yeah, and I will say it has come up in these discussions. The city and the county's consultant on this deal actually worked on the Miami Stadium deal, but he says, hey, I was just working for the client. The county was our client. What they wanted to do was defer all these crazy debt payments. They were voting on numbers they didn't fully know. He kind of put it on the county for mishandling that. But it is kind of like a boogeyman. The Marlins Stadium deal is like a boogeyman, and I think the circumstances are different, so I don't want to make them apples to kind of compare them apples to apples. But it is a cautionary tale. It certainly is a cautionary tale.
Do you feel, having seen both of them, you're watching the second one happen at this point? Do you feel like the group that in St. Petersburg right now is more prepared because of that deal, and as a group in terms of the tools? Like you were mentioning that one of them was, a lawyer, etc., or is still practicing law, whichever way that goes. And so are they well equipped to kind of handle this, or is that part of why they want more time to digest the ins and outs of the deal?
I will say, like, first of all, I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about the Miami Stadium deal to talk super intelligently about it. I can't go in depth as I am in this with that. And I wish I could. I'm one person really kind of covering this, but it's come up a few times. I feel like council has gotten assurances that no, this is very different. And I'm just gonna say it because I feel like I can. St. Pete politicians, I think, are very different from Miami politicians. Having covered them, I covered education at the Miami Herald from 2019 to 2018 to 2021. They just operate very differently. I don't know if it's a super apples to apples, but I do think that it's just kind of blooming in the back that like nobody wants what's happening over there. But truly, I don't know enough to really compare the two on their faces.
I know we're not supposed to ask you for an opinion, so I won't. But can you, from what you're seeing of all the players that are happening and the deadlines for these workshops, does it seem feasible that we'll have an agreement by mid-July?
So I actually found out about this. I mean, I feel like I'm building up to something big. Maybe. I think it might be pushed only because my colleague Jack Evans, who covers the Pinellas County Commission, a big player in this, right, especially on the stadium side, said that said yesterday, I believe it was yesterday when the commission met, that Pinellas County Administrator Barry Burton kind of cast doubt that the city would be ready to have its already delayed but scheduled workshop on the stadium on June 13th. He kind of expressed doubt that the city would have legal documents ready 2 weeks in advance. That would be next Thursday for review. And the reason why that is because a council member, Ed Montanari, asked for two workshops. One was on the redevelopment. That's the one that happened like 2-3 weeks ago. And one on the stadium separately to go over the finances. And that any documents or agreements or presentations, anything that comes with it has to be available 2 weeks in advance so that all council members could review the material and be prepared to ask questions that day. So that means that, right, the city has to be ready with documents by next Thursday. And Barry Burton was telling commissioners, I believe yesterday, saying like, it's planned for June 13th if the city is ready. And he kind of left open that, like, would they even be ready at that point? So if they're not, then that's June 13th is actually the last time that the city council can meet before they go on, and they have an annual summer break every year. And this year it starts June 14th to July 7th. So if you go past June 13th, you're not coming back until July, and then that would kind of push everything off. So then you would be looking at a vote at the earliest, like maybe late July. So it depends. If they're ready on the 13th, then they will have a workshop, and they're supposed to have first readings for like a regulatory document with the state and for like rezoning the gas plant district. But there was some drama last week because city council was saying that's way too packed of a schedule. I mean, they'll be there for at minimum 16 hours, at minimum 16 hours that day, meeting for the workshop and then a city council meeting to follow. And so council wanted to break that up. So I really doubt that both those things will happen. They were also looking at maybe moving the workshop up to June 11th. That's that Tuesday. But that means that the documents have to be due even earlier. And if a county administrator is telling county commissioners, I don't even think they're going to be ready June 13th, then that makes me think they're really not going to be ready June 11th. So it kind of depends. But yeah, I think you might be looking at late July, and that's probably reasonable, if not even maybe leaning optimistic. But I think reasonable because the city will have weeks without council meeting to really just focus on the agreements in that summer break. So I would say like maybe late July is possible. Possible, likely, depends.
Oh, come on, commit. No.
I mean, I don't know. It's a crystal ball.
I know. I'm teasing you. But no,
Yeah.
No, because I realize that. But I do have a very serious question. How does a reporter prepare for a 16-hour day of listening to people talk?
Well, I will say that it really helps that, well, first of all, they actually allow us to bring in drinks, which on normal council meetings they don't, which is very. I actually think they should let me bring in coffee all the time, but whatever. At least on the days that at least on the days it counts, they'll let me bring in some coffee. But it does help that we also put in public records requests for the latest versions of the agreement, so we have like a pretty good idea of what's in there. Now, of course, the stadium is like 12 documents, so there's actually 3 of us at the paper who are going through all this stuff. So that helps. I've got good colleagues. I know all the council members. I know all the staff at City Hall because I've been covering City Hall since July of 2021. So it helps to know the players. It helps to just be familiar and have that access and kind of know how things are going to go. I've got a vacation planned right after that. So I'll work hard and then, I'll get to have a little break.
You turn off the phone, it's do
Oh,
not
yeah.
disturb.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh,
It's long.
gosh. So do you still follow the fish?
Do I still follow the fish? I remember when they won the World Series in 2003. That's like a pretty vivid memory. But we just weren't really a baseball family. We were much more into basketball. We were huge Miami Heat fans. Obviously still are. And then really big into college football. So we're not super baseball people, but I will say, I go to way more Rays games. I think in my life I've been to like 2 Marlins games. I've been to at least, I don't know, 10, 12 Rays. Not a ton, because there's 81 home games, but quite a bit for not having grown up with baseball, really.
Matt, you got any other insights or questions on we can offer?
I have
Miss
one
Colleen?
question. So, one of the big things that I know I was talking to Mark about in terms of this deal was the naming rights and the fact that the Rays seem to be
Yes.
adamant in terms of getting those naming rights, so that I think they can finance using that money really. But has the city at all mentioned any, at any point that they would like a piece of those naming rights, and who do you see as a potential naming rights, corporation?
So I think right now, again, I'm going off the top of my head. I tweeted this, and I want to say that right now the city gets 50% of the naming rights, and I think they get 50% of parking, or there's another revenue source. Under this new agreement, I tweeted it. So I want to say it's half naming rights and half parking, but I can't super remember off the top of my head. But there's some revenue splitting there with the city. Under this new agreement, the Rays keep pretty much all revenue streams. I think literally all of them. They keep naming rights 100%, concessions 100%, parking 100%. What else? I feel like I'm missing a big one. Naming, broadcast rights 100%. All of that stays with the Rays. See, this deal is so complicated that like it brings back like, oh, there's all these other things. But yeah, as it's written right now, no sharing with the city at all, 0. Or the county for that matter. I think as it is right now, they're only paying $1 million to the county every year for 25 years. And I think they have to pay to reimburse the city for like traffic. So I think they paid like $450,000, I think, or something like that a year, and it goes up 5% every year or something like that. Who would be a naming sponsor? That's a great question. I literally have no idea. I'm sorry. I wish I knew. It would be super dope. If I knew, there would be a story on it.
Yeah.
But I don't know the answer. I don't know. I heard something about maybe keeping Tropicana Field, but I feel like, don't quote me on that. I feel like that was just some rumor I heard. I don't have that from an official source. I do not know. I do not know at all. But the city does not get a cut as it's written right now.
That's too bad. Like in terms of the, if you're going to try to sell this to the people in the city and say, like we're still going to be getting some of the money back through this, because I see it as a long-term agreement of what, like 30, 40, 50 years over time. Like if you're actually able to recoup some of the money to put back into programs that people are worried about not being able to fund because of this, then that's the one route that you would have to kind of fund that over time.
I think the Rays would point to, but look at all, this is, as you all know, I don't have to tell you, the Trop is surrounded by asphalt and parking lots, and it's not exactly tax generating properties or whatever, it's not generating any taxes. So I think the Rays and Hines kind of point to, well, look, we're going to transform all this and it's going to bring in so much money and, the dividends will be crazy. So I think they look at that. They've also pointed to like a 50 million community benefits package, which is also kind of paid piecemeal. Especially when it comes to affordable housing, there's also some huge loopholes there. I would say that's a huge linchpin in this deal, is like there are ways to get out of building that affordable housing. The penalties are pretty low compared to like what other developers face. So, if the Rays and Hines were here right now, they'd be like, well, we're doing all this. The economic benefits are going to be huge, reaped over time. Also, the agreement, I want to point out, is only for 30 years. Only for 30 years. That's a long time. But you could maybe renegotiate in 30 years. But honestly, in 30 years, they might be wanting more upgrades or more facility. It's going to keep going. Like, that's the story of stadiums in this country, right? Is that they always look for renovations, or they want to, upgrade and keep up. I think it's in there. It's in one of the agreements that, I think the stadium has to be in standard with like all the stadiums built in 2028 or something. There's always some language like that. But it is important to point out that in the new agreement, as it's written, the Rays would be on the hook for any renovations and upgrades, where now the city helps them out. Right. So I should make a fair point there. Again, it's all kind of coming back to me because it's a lot of information. Yeah. But in exchange for no revenues being shared, basically with the city, the Rays are on the hook for their own renovations or upgrades or anything they want to do.
Right, and for overages in the original.
Yes, yeah, right. That's correct, and for anything, right? Any stadium cost overages and for infrastructure overruns. Yes, they are on the hook for that.
Well, Colleen, I can't thank you enough for joining us here today on Baseball Biz on Deck and giving us a little bit more insight and clarity about how things are moving along with the proposed Rays Stadium. And let's see, Colleen, they can find you on Twitter, or X rather, at Colleen_Wright, and that's COLLEEN_ Wright is WRIGHT.
That's me.
All right. I'm telling you, you've been a great source for me as far as tracking what's happening with the Rays and this whole project. And like I said, when I heard you ask that question back in January 2023, I said, well, so many times when it comes to reporting, that getting access to somebody who can ask a question that's not pre-approved, I thought that was it. That was not paid access. That was a good question. And I salute you for asking. I actually salute Brian Auld for answering it in an honest way.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.
So what can we expect next from you?
Oh, gosh. Well, I've got, my colleague Jack Evans is actually working on a good story about how this agreement doesn't account for inflation at all. So when we talk about future payments, they're not adjusted for inflation at all. It's a good story. I'm excited about his. I'll be looking into some of the parking situation. We talk about traffic and parking. I'm going to be looking into these garages. The city and the Rays actually just selected a developer or like a construction firm for those garages. So I've got another, my colleague Jay Kriseman is looking a little bit into Hines. So, we're working on it. It's a lot of tedious work. It really is. But there's always like something to pick at. It's overwhelming, but yeah, we'll keep bringing good coverage, and it depends how you are on these delays. But we're gonna keep at it and just keep finding out what we need to find out.
Well, thank you for doing that for all of us.
Appreciate you reading.
Yeah, I will say that the coverage overall for the stadium issues from the beginning, have been stellar. There's been like you mentioned before, all the way through, there's been turmoil here and there, with different reasoning, whether it be sister city or adversarial kind of relationships. So I think all the way through, the coverage has been, perfect, really, to kind of point out both sides of the issues that go on. So that's a kudos to all of you guys that are covering this.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think the Times is a great place. This was my first job coming out of college. Went to work back at the Miami Herald, my hometown paper, for 3 years, and really honestly missed it here. So when there was a job opening to cover the city of St. Petersburg, I was like, this is perfect. This is a perfect match. So I love my job. It's always interesting. And it is a huge issue. It's really cool to cover something that will literally change the city. I mean, if you think about the scope of this, it's a small village that they're building, 5,000 residences. That's huge. It's huge. So it's I will say it's overwhelming. It's extremely overwhelming, but it's cool to be a part of, of that history. And, we're a good paper. We kind of have a really good reputation, and I'm just proud to work for them.
Okay, well, great. Colleen, I want to thank you again for joining us here today on Baseball Biz on Deck. I'm Mark Carbon, and of course, that's Matt Germain with me here. We're looking forward to a great future with the Rays and potentially get that deal done sooner than later and make everybody happy. I don't know if we can ever do that, but as best we can. Matt, any other final words or questions?
No, just if ever you want to come back on once it's closer to, I'm sure Mark and I would love to kind of poke a few questions your way and see how, maybe right before the final vote, just to kind of see where you think it's headed. And then hopefully you enjoy the coverage, because once it happens, then you're just covering how the development is going, right?
Yeah.
So that'll be different.
I mean, and even when if/when maybe it passes, I mean, that's just the beginning.
Right.
Really. I mean, if you think about it, that's just the beginning. So I'll be here. Please have me back anytime. I love to talk about it.
Well, thanks again, Colleen.
All right. Thank you both.
Say hello to my good friend, Conan.
I will.
It's been a few years. Anyway, again, thank you, and we'll hope to have you back here real soon.
All right. Thanks so much.
Wow, Matt, man, that was some insight. Colleen really brought the stories. We get a sense of it from what she's writing. And again, I'll remind folks they can find her on TampaBay.com and they read the paper, the Tampa Bay Times. And you can find her as far as on Twitter at Colleen_Wright. And that's spelled COLLEEN_Wright, WRIGHT.
Yeah, it's interesting to get a feel for things that that she's thinking about. And I think when she initially laid out what they've gone through, all the way through the process, it was the best kind of coverage of exactly how, in broad terms, what they've gone through to get to this point. And I think that's the thing that you have to consider also when it comes to Stu Sternberg. He's always had the best leverage in St. Petersburg. That's where, he owns land, he has development rights, he has a whole bunch of things that he's involved in there. So that's where, his hat is really. It's not in Tampa. So you could argue in a way that Tampa has been used as leverage against St. Pete to try to get that best deal as they can, right? So now that they're getting to where you can actually see the end of the finish line, it's just funny to see how quiet, and that's why I asked, how the relationship is going since the sister city concept died, because to me, that's the indication of Stu Sternberg and his team going, okay, now we need to push this to the finish line, and we don't need any, things upsetting the cart as we push it through the finish line.
Let's hope that's the way it goes, my friend. I mean, it's a lot of reading people are going to have to do in a short bit of time and making some decisions. And I'm confident that Colleen will keep us surprised of that as well. But I see what you're saying with the buy-in with Stu and his investment already in St. Pete. So let's hope all those factors come into play and get this deal done. Post-production note: Colleen Wright posted on X.com the following: deleting this tweet because Montanari called me and said that because he wrote that the workshop should be scheduled to allow council at least 2 weeks to review documents instead of must, council doesn't have to vote to change that, and the city can shorten that window. So take a look on x.com if you want to see the full text of that tweet. But I do like the idea that we're looking at should instead of must, giving even more opportunity for options, if that's such a thing, for the council in voting. Now back to the regular program.
I don't want to ruin your night, Mark, but Josh Lowe was pulled from the game with right side tightness. I was watching it on the side for, just to keep my head on straight. And yeah, so we'll cross our fingers that it's nothing serious. He's called day to day for now, but it's possible he ends up back on IL.
Jeez and crackers, man. I'm tired of this stuff. Come on, guys. I don't know. Well, I hope he does back soon. I mean, you see all this happen with these young players and Brandon coming back, and you say, oh my gosh, I hope that oblique stays healthy and everything else to boot. And you just don't know what's going to happen. You have Pepio up there on the mound, and the ball comes right back and smacks him in the leg. Mm-hmm. So let's hope that Josh is doing fine and dandy here soon, because, man, they ask a lot of the human body in this game, and it's not surprising when we see sometimes it doesn't hold up as well as we would like.
I'll make it up with some positivity. Shane Baz has finally made it through 4 innings in a start tonight. He only allowed 3 hits and he struck out 4. It's the most strikeouts he's had since he started his rehab. So that is extremely encouraging. The extra day of rest seems to have helped him. So, yeah, positive with the negative.
All right, brother. Thank you for bringing it along. A little sunshine to finish up the show here, talking about our Tampa Bay Rays and the excitement coming through with hopefully get everything done with that Rays Stadium in St. Pete. Fingers crossed, toes crossed, and we'll keep you up as things progress. So I want to thank everybody for joining us here again today on Baseball Biz on Deck. Mr. Matt Germain and myself, Mark Carbon. Thank you, and look forward to talking with you all again real soon. Remember, you can find us on podcast services everywhere, whether it's iHeartRadio, Spotify, of course, on baseballbizondeck.com. Everywhere there's podcast played, you'll find us. And go ahead, when you find us there, go ahead and leave us some little love. We look for the 5-star rating. Subscribe to us or whatever. And we look forward again to talking to you guys real soon. Special thanks to XTech RUX for the music, Rocking Forward.